Hi, it's Teresa from Dodge Nature Center, and time for another Nature to Go. Well, it's almost the end of October, and that means it's Halloween. That conjures up images of bats, and ghosts, and witches. Witches on brooms flying across a moonlit sky, or standing beside a bubbling cauldron concocting some foul potion using fantastical ingredients like eye of newt, toe of frog, blind worm's sting. Sounds pretty creepy, right? The crazy thing is, those names don't actually mean things like eyes and toes. It was a code. All those mysterious ingredients were actually plants, parts of plants. Long before there were pharmacies and stores with over-the-counter medications, people relied on plants for cures to all sorts of medical conditions. Not everybody knew how to use the plants. You'd go to a local healer who was often a woman, the wise woman in the area. If you had a rash or a cough, you could get a salve or a syrup that would help cure you. The recipes for these cures were closely guarded secrets, passed down in a family or from a master to an apprentice. Why were they so secretive? Well, if everybody knows how to make the cures, nobody will come to you for help and, well, there goes your livelihood. There were differences in plant names already, depending on where you lived, but the code gave even more unusual names that kept everybody guessing. Why do we tend to think of witches around a cauldron and throwing weird ingredients in? Well, it's all because of Shakespeare. Shakespeare took advantage of the mysteriousness of it all when he wrote the famous scene with the witches around a cauldron predicting Macbeth's future in his play Macbeth. What was the code then? The plant parts that they used were flowers and stems and leaves and roots and even the sap inside. Eye of newt actually meant mustard seeds. Toe of frog, well, what they would do is pull up a buttercup and there's a bulb underneath it, and that's what they would use in the potion that they were making. Blindworm's sting most likely refers to poppies which have a poison, and that's why it would be a sting. If they used the word tongue, they meant you're supposed to use leaves or petals. If they say tail, they want you to use the stem. Blood, well, that's logical. They want you to use the sap of the plant. And the kinds of plants that they used, well, they are mostly things that were found growing around them in the woods and in the forest, and things that we nowadays even consider to be more like weeds than actual beneficial plants. So there were things like asters, buckthorn, burdock, chamomile, plantain, dandelions, geraniums, holly, moss, parsley, purslane, rosemary, tansy, walnuts, yarrow. Those are just a few of the plants to name. Not so creepy after all. Well, how did it go then from the women being the helpful healers in a village to being maligned witches? Unfortunately, being secretive has its downside. People were suspicious about things they couldn't understand, especially if it had to do with health and life and death. So any kind of mysterious behavior came under suspicion and became something to fear. The women weren't viewed as wise anymore. They were considered evil and so were called witches. Persecuted, the women were driven away from society and killed in many cases. So, as you enjoy the sights and sounds of Halloween this year, remember that those unusual spells being whispered by witches originally were recipes for simple cures to common ailments, and they weren't using weird ingredients, but were relying on plants that are readily growing around us even today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Nature to Go, and we'll talk to you again next time.